Hello, everybody. It's been a while. The story I'm going to discuss now, I've had it up on Facebook since the 24th of August 2024, but I decided to put it up on YouTube because YouTube may enable more people to have access to it, and it's a very important link in our history. Matute Ogwo. Present generation will read it, future generations will read it. It's essentially about one of the visionaries of this era, one of the visionaries to come to the people of Israel, one of the visionaries that the people of Israel received from Chukwu in this era. And his name is Michael Alexander. The way I structured the story on Facebook, if you want to search for it, you may just say the story is just developing and it will bump up. As some of you may know, the era, that's period, everyone agrees to be the golden one for the people that, if you choose to call them in their vernacular, you will use the term Igbo or Igbo. But if you want to pronounce those monikers in English, then you use the term Hebrew. Everyone agrees that their golden era was the one we must refer to as the Azikiwe Okpara Milieu. Azikiwe was the greatest postmodern Igbo. Okpara was his protege. He handed over political leadership of the Igbo people to Michael Okpara, this surgeon that instituted a lot of development projects in what we would call Igbo land, or as I would prefer to call it because I'm using English language, the Hebrew republics in West Africa. The economy of the eastern region of Nigeria, which was where you found probably 4/6 of the Igbo people at the time of Okpara and Azikiwe, became the fastest growing in the world. Think about this again. Fastest growing economy in the world, not in Europe, not in North America, not in East Asia, but in the part of the world that some Europeans had called the Dark Continent. I must also regard this period as one of the best for the state of Israel. History has been totally silent on this, but then why are we historians if we would not reveal things that are hidden? This era that I refer to as the golden era of the Igbos in the modern period was also one of the best periods in the history of the postmodern state of Israel. The state that Herzl conceived and Ben-Gurion and his Zionist associates bettered in 1948. This period that I regard as one of the best for the Igbos was also one of the best for these states. By the way, Azikiwe was the mentor of Mandela. So, somebody who could be the mentor of Mandela, acknowledged by Mandela himself, you would know that at his time, this means that at his time, he was one of the 5 greatest statesmen in the world. How many people would know that somebody identified as a black man could reach that level? But Azikiwe was up there. He was the mentor of who was who in Africa at his time, and in the diaspora for that matter. Every of his peers in the Caribbean and African American world looked up to him. And in Nigeria, he was essentially the only nationalist, the only father of modern Nigeria. There were not three fathers of modern Nigeria. Historian, Fulani historian Bala Usman said Nigeria will be economical with the truth. If they said that Nigeria had three founding fathers, Nigeria had only one, and that was Azikiwe. If Africa has to have a father of African independence, it will be Azikiwe. And it was Azikiwe whose era of leadership of the Igbos was, or that I described as the golden period, he handed over to Okpara. To become president of Nigeria, he handed over leadership of the Igbos in political affairs to Dr. Michael Okpara. Every Igbo still mourns the passage of Okpara many decades after he passed on. Okpara was a rebuilder. There is a secret story. That's the secret we are going to unravel now and tie it up with what's going on. You know, I started this discourse by mentioning that God is kind again. He sent a visionary to the people of Israel, and his name, as I mentioned, is Michael Alexander. There is a secret story about the golden era. Azikiwe, Okpara, and other Igbo leaders of their time and the Israelis were very close. I would bet that most Jews, most Israelis, most Igbos don't know what I said. But a few people that their eyes are on the ball, real scholars, they know what I'm talking about, and it's been reproduced in an academic study done by Dr. Daniel Lee, Swiss Israeli anthropologist, whom I invited to Nigeria, and he spent 3 weeks with us in Abuja and in Igbo land. Okpara was a man of action and was also wise and bold. Publicly, like the great Zeke, he said he was an Israelite. One of my brothers, I call him a brother because he's Igbo like myself. He's a medical doctor. He's based in Canada. He views Azikiwe as his hero. He named one of the children Zeke. Disgracefully, this fellow denied his Israelite ancestry because he listened to Afrocentrists. And by the way, I'm going to take down some of them very soon. I'm going to expose some of them as very, very ignorant people. When I say take down, I mean expose that they were not really educated people. He cited one of them from East Africa as one of his, quote, historians about the Igbos. Publicly, the great Zeke said he was an Israelite. Okpara joined him in saying the same. If you deferred to Zeke, you will defer to what Zeke believed in. Israelis joined Okpara to rebuild the eastern region of Nigeria. And the Igbo leaders of Okpara's era aligned closely with the aspirations of the Jewish state. They gave the Jewish state support. All that the Jewish state did, they were sure of Igbo support. And what did that state seek to do? That state sought to extend development to a lot of marginalized parts of the world. The Igbos aided them in such aspirations. And it was a symbiotic relationship. Both sides benefited. How did Israelis see what was going on then? There was a nation that its members were one of the most hardworking people in the world. I have a close friend from the great former Benin Empire. He told me that when he was growing up, the Igbos he met were not scared of hard work. Extremely strong individuals. So this potentially powerful nation, which its leaders, by all standards, world leaders, didn't feel that declaring they were Israelites would be disadvantageous to them. at an era when only very few people in the world wanted to have anything to do with this identity. That was what the Israelis were looking at. So they value the relationship, because I don't know who wanted to have much to do with the Jewish people or the people of the state of Israel in the 60s. But Igbos went beyond even saying that they themselves were Israelites. They welcomed Israelis into their own part of Nigeria. That's what the Israelis were seeing then. And the people who led these people then, we are not people who needed to go to Israel because they needed a place to go and do many work. Azikiwe was already one of the leaders of the world, and so was Okpara. Okpara was a surgeon, trained in Glasgow. Azikiwe had a PhD. These leaders assured Israelis that Igbo land was also their home. Among other things, Moshavim and Kibbutzim began to rise up in Igbo land. By the way, all over Igbo land, you would find miniature versions of Kibbutzim and Moshavim more. That's essentially the structure. What I believe that the Jewish people did in Israel was try to replicate ancient Israel. We should find its closest model in the Igbo society. So what they call the Moshavim are things that are traditional to the Igbos. Israelis and Okpara began to set up the modern versions of these institutions to complement and supplement the traditional Mbobo in the home of all Igbos in their various obodo, that is republics. The place began to boom. That was when the Igbo economy became the world's fastest growing. Israel itself benefited. Igbos defended Israelis' interests at various important fora. The relationship was symbiotic. Both peoples respected and treated each other as equals. This is very important. As these two groups begin to reach out for each other again, it is important that Igbos and Jews recognize that the relationship has to be based on mutual respect and total equality. And most importantly, as Umunne, they all emanated from the loins of that great Hebrew called Jacob. Sadly, disaster came in 1966. The golden era came to an end, but however, a careful historian would recognize the fact, if disaster had not come, and Igbo and Jew had continued to work together, by today the world would be completely different. The people of Israel, that's what both of them would have become. Would have been much more stronger, and the world would have been in far better shape, because the Hebrew culture, which is what they would have reproduced, would have contributed more. The world needs Hebrew culture. Jewish culture is good, Igbo culture is good. They can do a lot for the world, but Hebrew culture will do 1,000,000 times what these two cultures I mentioned could do. Because the Hebrew culture, which by the way, God himself and Moses called Omenana, what the Igbos call religion and culture, is the Baba. 70 million Igbos and 15 million Jews working together would have changed the world for good. I can say that had tragedy not come, that by today, we would have been more optimistic about the fate and future of both the children of Israel and humanity. We will be less worried about wars. We will be less worried about hunger. We will be less worried about anti-Semitism. We will be less worried about racism if these two had continued to work together, if tragedy had not befallen the Igbo people. From 1966, the date that calamity struck the Igbos, and onwards till today, the Igbos and the Jews cooled their relationship. I don't want to get into why this relationship was cooled. There were so many factors that were responsible. But every now and then, some Jews and some Igbos met, but because Those who we are meeting didn't know much about what had happened in the past. Much didn't come out of the meetings. At a point, many Jews began to see the Igbo people as just, quote, Africans and blacks. These are not identities of the Igbos. The Igbos they met in the 1960s that they regarded as their peers and equals, they did not see them as blacks and Africans. They saw them as, at worst, as equals. They were not to be overblamed anyway. These Jews and Israelis that began to see the Igbos as just blacks and Africans, I wouldn't overblame them because they do not know, they were not taught. No matter the level they have attained in life, they are ignorant of the things I'm talking about. They did not know that Okpara protected Israelis in Nigeria. They did not know that Azikiwe stood out as the only prominent African that fought Hitler from 1939 to 1945. These are facts that are available even in the archives of Israel, but they don't know this because most people cannot stress themselves to go into deep studies presently. They did not know who the Igbos were. And because they were not taught, that was why they began to see people like the Igbos as just blacks and Africans. Some Igbos also began to see themselves as typical blacks. That's what they heard through the social media, through the Afrocentrics, through the funny character from East Africa that began to teach Igbos Igbo history, when I can bet that he cannot talk about his own history. And Jews, such Igbos, began to see as whites, whom they did not see how they could be related to. I can also only blame them only to an extent, because if my own father and mother had not told me that I was an Israelite, I would probably be lost in confusion the way they were. However, in 2018, things began to change for the better. And this is where I descend again or go up again to the story of this Michael Alexander that I talked about. By the way, I want to do a little detour to talk about other people that we have stood on their shoulders. There was a Dr. Jack Zeller. He is also a visionary, a Jewish visionary. When he heard about the Igbo story, he knew that the people of Israel have missed opportunities throughout history, but that the Igbo history should be taken seriously by every Jew. You are talking about 70 million Israelites that have a homeland 2 times the size of the state of Israel, who also believe 100% that their ancestral homeland is in Eretz Israel, but who don't have any kind of interest in contesting that land with their brothers and sisters who go by their identity, Jews now, but who are ever willing to come and assist. Zeller knew that we were onto something extraordinarily important. Also, Heman Storik. I know my father, Joseph Ilona. I lost him in 1992. The next father I heard was Heman Storik. These were visionaries that have looked at this question and contributed immensely to make sure that these 2 arms of Israel come together. Also, we must never stop talking about the boldness, the nobility of Dr. Yehonatan Elazar, the head of Obadiah Alliance. He looked at what's happening and said, this is a disgrace. That there are people going all over the world looking for, quote, lost Jews, because I don't believe that any arm of Israel is lost. And in plain sight, some of them have visited the Igbos. Due to political considerations, they were afraid to take the arms of brotherhood that the Igbos have been offering them. So, Yehonatan took a bold step. Gedalia Gofen. I have a story with this man. He connected me to Nathan Sharansky, Dore Gold. These are leaders of the contemporary state of Israel. We had conversations. In time, they will all see the need to go back to what I told them when I was in Jerusalem. All these are more that I couldn't mention are individuals that contributed to taking us back to what Zeke, Okpara, and Gold and Mia had started. Again, I say in 2018, a great leap forward was made. A barrier was crossed. A Jew and an Igbo, that's myself, with the right mindset began to work again. And this Jew, this Ashkenazi Jew, is the Michael Alexander. The gentleman standing with yours sincerely in the photograph, you would see as the cover of this video is Professor Michael Alexander. He worked tirelessly to supervise, oversee, and fund an academic project that has already changed both Igbo and Jewish history for good. I will even say world history, because if the people of Israel get things right, humanity would take another look at Hebrew culture, because Hebrew culture is the only culture that can give you what empires will give you without suppressing, oppressing, subsuming any group. And that's the culture that the Igbos, the Jews, the Samaritans, the Karaites, working together will bequeath to humanity. And by leading this study, or leading the production of this study, this gentleman earned the title of expert in Igbo history. And on this note, ladies and gentlemen, I urge you to be optimistic. When we know who we are, when we know our history, when we take them seriously, when we take the history seriously, we will take the culture seriously. And when we take the culture seriously, we will be one with the God of Israel again, and with his ways and traditions. And only then can we say that we have begun to fast track what the Jewish community using Hebrew calls tikkun olam. Thank you. Shalom. Dalo. Have a good day.